Welcome to What About PS, a Poland Syndrome podcast, where we talk about all things Poland Syndrome. The episodes that you can look forward to in this podcast speak about the male and female experience, motherhood and breastfeeding, general day-to-day living, health and fitness, and also including hand and chest affected people who have Poland Syndrome. If you have Poland Syndrome, or if you know of someone who has Poland Syndrome, then be sure to have a look out and listen to our latest episodes.
Hi, I'm Caron. I am 23 and I live in the UK and I have Poland Syndrome. I am fully right side affected, so my hand, my chest and my ribs are affected in my arm. And I was diagnosed at birth.
So you're diagnosed at birth? That's quite rare, actually.
Yeah. I was born 6 weeks early, so I was a very small baby anyway. But when I kind of came out, they were like, hang on, there's not something quite right here, because my right side was significantly smaller. And they just kind of kept doing tests, and all the doctors, they had no idea what was going on. So they ended up going to the library in the hospital. And then they kind of just came to the conclusion that I had Poland syndrome and that there was something more to be done, sort of thing. But none of them had ever heard of it.
And how is that? I'm not too sure if you've spoken to your parents about this, but how is that kind of diagnosis process for your parents, especially considering the doctors didn't know exactly what was going on from the get-go?
I mean, my mum was kind of out of it completely. She doesn't remember much about the whole birth. It was quite, I think, a traumatic thing for her, because it was kind of one appointment. They went, oh no, you need to give birth now, sort of thing. It was a very rushed job. My dad got the phone call at work, like, hang on, I'm going to have a child, sort of thing. And then, just 6 weeks. He was not prepared. And then my dad said it was very kind of whirlwind sort of experience. There were so many things going on. I was in an incubator for the first 12 weeks of my life. So they were like, well, there were so many different things that they were worried about. And then Poland syndrome was something they knew about, but they weren't kind of talked to about it or had any consultations until I was a bit older, when they could finally see how I was affected when I started to grow and got a bit healthier and stuff.
And I mean, firstly, it's amazing that you were diagnosed so young and that you were diagnosed at all, because there's so many people, even hearing everyone's stories, that go throughout their whole lives either diagnosing themselves or never being diagnosed. How was it for you growing up and having your body change in the way that Poland syndrome affected it?
I think I was trying to think about this yesterday, when I think about my journey with Poland syndrome, it's just kind of been forever. It's all I've ever known, really. But I do think when I started to get a bit older and really realize what was going on, I didn't really see anything in myself. I just kind of saw how my parents treated me differently to different kids, and kind of that whole bubble wrap sort of thing. I was just completely barricaded for a little bit. Just, we were so worried about anything. But the main thing I remember when I was really young was learning to teach myself how to be left-handed. I would go to, because I was born right-handed, and obviously my right hand is, well, small, it's tiny. So they were like, well, I had to go to these consultants, and they gave me special cutlery, and they kind of gave me loads of different learning kind of accessories sort of things, because I really struggled to hold paper down, so my paper would slide everywhere. So in school I was my handwriting would be really unneat, and I would really struggle with left-handed things. But then I think as I got older, I just kind of got used to it a bit more. I really don't feel like I had much of a journey with learning about Poland syndrome, because I knew about it my whole life. I was always told look, you are a bit different, there is this going on. And it's always just, I always just remember going in, my dad's called it my MOT, I would go in for a yearly appointment and just check how things were going. That's all I really remember, just the endless hospital appointments.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And besides your hand being affected, you mentioned that your ribs were affected as well. That was actually something I only learned about doing these chats with a lot of the community members, because I'm left chest affected, but I think I have the mildest case of Poland syndrome. And then we did a chat with Lewis Hatchett, and he said that he was also born without certain ribs. And that was quite wild for me to learn about. How has that affected you in terms of having it have affected your ribs?
Well, I didn't learn about my ribs until I was a lot older. That was something we always just thought it was my chest and my hand. And then I had a few like little health issues going on, and my dad kept being like, "Well, it's all happening on the right side." So I got like a right-sided chest infection, and then there was like just so many different things that kept happening. So we went to one of my GPs and we said, "Look, is it this all like linked in?" Did a few tests and they did find that my ribs, like, I don't think I'm missing any ribs, they're just smaller. And my lung on my right hand side is like, I've just got less capacity in it. So I think like when I currently have a cold now, so like when I get a cough, it just kind of lingers for a bit longer because one lung is just like slightly smaller.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, the ribs haven't really affected me, but I can feel it. Like if I'm lying down, I can feel that my ribs are smaller on one side and I hold less fat on one side. So I think that kind of makes it more obvious.
Yeah, yeah. And so does it affect kind of your breathing or your fitness or that kind of, do you feel like you get out of breath?
Not really. Not really. I do think like when I was younger, they called it sport induced asthma, but I do really just think that was just a like lack of capacity on one side because as I got older and just kind of my body adapted, I never experienced it again. And I mean, going to the gym, I obviously get out of breath, but it's nothing too wild. I don't walk up the stairs and feel like I'm going to pass out or
Yeah.
anything. So
I walk up the stairs all the time and feel like I'm going to pass out. And I feel like no matter how fit you are, walking up the stairs will always humble you. But that's really interesting because I was diagnosed as a baby as well, and I got into swimming because the doctors recommended that for the upper body strength. And so I competed in swimming until I was about 12, 13 years old. And I also had sports-induced asthma. And funnily enough, it was only when I was swimming. And then that went away, and then I got it a bit just before lockdown as well, and then it went away. And so it would be interesting to see if a lot more people with Poland syndrome have similar experiences and if that is maybe linked to things like the rib cage or the lungs. So that'll be very interesting. But what I thought was interesting with your story was all the surgeries that you've had. I
yeah, I've
mean,
had
crazy.
16 in total.
16 surgeries.
Yeah, and then 9 on my breasts.
Can you take us through all of the surgeries that you've had? And I'd really like to dive into that because I know that is a massive topic within the community is surgeries, what to expect, if you should get it, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd love to hear your journey on that.
I mean, how long do we have?
We have time.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I had my first ever breast surgery when I was 15. I had a few on my hand when I was a lot younger, and the last one was when I was 12. But like the whole like journey of having my breast surgeries, it was very kind of established early on that that was an option.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time, I kind of thought it was my only option. I didn't really realize, like, oh, okay, I don't actually have to have it. But I mean, I don't regret having them. I'm really glad I did it because I think being 15 in a very small area, it was, and also just being a girl in general and social media and like the way other children view you, I had my hand as a difference. And then when I hit puberty, it was very noticeable that I only had one breast. Like I think I was a D cup on the left side. So having that and then nothing, like I was completely flat chested, there's no muscle, no tissue, anything. So it really did affect me like, in the way of like, I don't feel happy in myself. I didn't like going to school. We had very tight blouses and it was just all very obvious,
Mm-hmm.
especially in PE and stuff, wearing like a polo shirt that's like quite tight. I was not comfortable. I was stuffing toilet roll. So I always knew that like I would have this surgery. And then my pediatric surgeon kind of came to me when I was about 14 and he said, we can look into start doing something now because I kept like being like, I want to have something done. When can I have something done? Sort of thing. And I went in and he said, like, there's obviously so I had a tissue expander implant, which they inject with saline every 2 weeks. So it's extensive in itself. I mean, I was going to hospital every 2 weeks.
For how long? Sorry,
And
is it every 2 weeks indefinitely or?
It was meant to be, but that implant, I had the implant put in of October 2015. And then every 2 weeks, so every other Tuesday, I was going down to the hospital, which is, I mean, I had to get the bus. It was a 2-hour bus journey pretty much altogether.
Wow.
So I was missing a whole day of school, like every other Tuesday. So that affected my education in a way. And then in the February of 2016, I was at my bi-weekly appointment, and we noticed, I was sat there with my sister and I said, something isn't right. I had been feeling it for a little while, but I just kind of thought it was teething pain, my body getting used to, having something injected and expanding all the time. And then I was like, hang on, there it really isn't something right. I could feel the saline just going down my arm. My arm went like really cold. It was really like very traumatic, I think. Like as a 15-year-old, I was lying there like, no, something isn't right. So we said, like, hang on, like, I need to have an ultrasound or something. Like, you need to check the implant, because I just knew there was something wrong. And they checked it and they said, yeah, it does need to come out, like it was leaking. And the port that they would inject into kind of was dislodged from the implant. I think something went wrong just along the way, and it kind of it was rough. But the first surgery was the toughest surgery. Obviously, being 15, they said to my dad, like, oh, it's only going to be a few hours. I had my latimus dorsi muscle moved to the front. That was all done. And I've got 3 scars, one on my back, in my armpit, and then under my right breast. And then they put in the implant, but something just wasn't working quite right. So it took them 7 hours to do the surgery.
7 hours?
So 7 hours, and my dad was freaking out. He kind of thought I'd just been forgotten about. Like, he was like, are you just telling me that, like, have you just not told me she's done? Like, and then he came into the room where I was recovering, and I was covered in so many different wires and tubes. And he said it was honestly an awful sight, and it was not something we expected from that surgery. And I don't really remember. I was in hospital for a week after that. Had a nice little issue with morphine.
Oh no.
Okay. I had a PCA drip of morphine, and I was injecting it. Every time the button went green, I'd click it because I was in so much pain.
Oh man.
And I ended up overdosing on the morphine.
Oh my word.
It was like 3 a.m. or something. My dad had just left the hospital. He'd been home for about an hour trying to sleep because he was seeing me every day, going to work, coming to see me, going home, going to work, sort of thing. It was like 3 a.m, and I just remember like a light, and I felt no pain. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm getting better. And then the next thing I remember, there's loads of nurses and doctors around me, and I'm being flushed out of morphine. My heart rate went down to like 6 beats a minute. Like, they were like, and I was like, why did you do that? I was feeling so much better. And they were like, yeah, you were not doing too great. So then they had to call my dad down, and 4 a.m, he's driving down October, tipping down rain, like panicked, like, not to worry you, but your daughter has just overdosed on morphine, sort of thing.
Do they not put like a limit on how much morphine you can take? Or like when the light goes green, do you do it every time, or is it only when you feel like it, or how does that work?
It's only when you feel like it, but I was in so much pain that kind of any chance I could have, I was clicking it. And I think giving a 15-year-old a button that lights up green isn't really the best idea.
And makes you feel good as well when you click it. Like,
yeah, it was like that instant kind of relief, and I just slept, and it made me feel good. And then, yeah, obviously the next day had that taken out because I was like, I don't want the morphine anymore. I don't want that. So that surgery was like, that's the one thing where I say about my surgeries, where I keep getting people being like, well, do you regret doing it because of the experience? And I think it's so rare that something like that does happen. I think a lot of surgeries, like, they're either smooth sailing or you have reactions. Like, everyone's going to react differently, and like no one could have predicted how it went. And I don't regret getting it done. The only thing was how short-lived the implant was that was sad. So I had it put in, and then I had it taken out 4 months later.
Why?
So the whole reason, because of the port being dislodged, they had to just say we have to take it out, because it was just going to then be like this empty sac, and they said there's not much point. But then I had the muscle move to the front, so there was kind of a bit of shape there left over. So that kind of tied me along. And then the next year in the December, I had a silicone implant put in, and that one went fine. That lasted for about 2 years. And I had, in between that, I was having a lot of muscle pain and nerve pain in my back where they moved my latissimus dorsi muscle. So they did like a corrective nerve surgery thing. I don't know, on my nerves. And then, so that was fine. That implant lasted 2 years. And then when I was 18, I got capsular contracture. I got grade 4 capsular contracture. So all of my muscle and all of the implant, it was just rock hard and it was getting pushed up to my collarbone.
Why
And
does
I
that
was
happen?
I don't actually know. I think it's just like the muscle around and all the scar tissue, it all starts to harden.
Mm-hmm.
So I was seeing, I went into A&E and I said, something isn't right. I'm in so much pain. I could feel it. It was making my arm go numb. Like there was just so much, like, it was so much pain. Like it was rock hard right up by my collarbone. And I was like, this isn't, like, obviously this isn't right. I kind of got a bit like dismissed left, right, and center sort of thing. Like, just, no, it'll go down. It's fine. You might just have a little bit of an infection. So about 4 courses of antibiotics. And then they said, okay, yeah, we're going to have to take it out. Like it's obviously not going down. So I had that implant taken out. And then I was like, oh. So I had 2 implants I tried and they didn't work. And I was a bit defeated by this point.
Understandably so.
I just left it. I was like, no, maybe not. Like, I'll just see how I go. I'm 18 now. I was like, right, I'll see how it goes. Sorry. And then, yeah, we just kind of left it for a little bit. I got a new surgeon because I was then 19, almost 20 at this point. So I got an adult surgeon, and then he told me about fat transfer.
Mm-hmm.
So he was like, I can take fat. I think they took it from my thighs and my lower stomach or something. And they did that, and they said, like, this is obviously, it might not give you the effects you want, and we're going to need to do a few surgeries to keep chopping it up. And I said, do you know what? As long as it's not an implant, at this point, I did not want an implant. I was like, as long as it's not an implant and it does something just to kind of really try and balance it out. So at this point, I was still completely natural on my left side. And they said, well, what we'll do is they reduce the left-hand side.
Okay.
So reduce that. And then we said, because this will then make sure I don't need an implant, or that was the plan. Had the first fat transfer in July of 2019. So I was just about to go to uni. So I kind of thought this is like a good time. Like I was about to meet so many new people, have to reintroduce my story of Poland syndrome. And I mean, to be expected, no one knew what it was. The first time I met one of my flatmates, I had to shake his hand, and I just kind of went, oh, God. And he just kind of looked at me like, okay, that's new. But he was lovely, so that was fine. But yeah, so I kind of had that surgery, and then 2 days after having that surgery, it was a day case, in and out, everything went fine. 2 days later, I had a blood clot, and I was still bleeding. Like I was redoing bandages every hour. Went to see the nurse at my GP, and they just went, "You need to go to hospital. Like you should have done that." And I was like, "Oh, for God's sake,
Not again."
I was like, how has this happened again? So I go down to hospital with my mum, and then they go, yeah, we need to just clean out the wound. There was a bit of scar tissue, a bit of blood, clean that out, and then they put a drain in. So I then had 2 surgeries within 3 days. And I was like, oh, I was so like out of it at this point. I just kind of went, Joe, do whatever you need to do. Like, it's fine. And obviously you hear blood clot and you go sort it out, like whatever. I was like, fine. Just started a new job as well. So I was calling them like, yeah, I won't be starting right now. Give me a second. And then, yeah, so that ended up being fine. And then, like I said, with fat transfer, it's either going to stick or it's not going to stick. Like you lose weight, it might go, you gain weight, but I've never gained weight on this side. It just, there's no new fat cells being produced. So I was just like, well, hopefully I just don't lose any weight and it stays. And it worked to the most part. It was fine. And then COVID hit. So no surgeries, nothing, which was fine. I didn't really feel like I needed one. And then 2021 saw my surgeon, and he said, we can do another one for you just to keep topping it up. I think for the first few, you're not meant to leave them too long. But obviously with COVID, I wasn't really expecting to have surgery on the NHS that wasn't necessary. It was all a bit up in the air at that time. So I said, right, okay, like, yeah, he came up to me and he said, like, do you want to have another one? He said it would be, very straightforward, which it was. This one went plain sailing. It was absolutely fine. And I said, yeah, okay, like I'll do another one. Why not? Sort of thing. Had that done and it worked. It was fine. I had no issues with recovery. It was the smoothest sailing ever, and I was happy. And then I didn't have any surgeries for another 2 years up until last August. And then I had been still having consultations with my surgeon about just like how the fat was staying, how it was doing, if I was happy with it. And I was still at this point where there was still a very obvious difference. All the fat had kind of dropped to the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just kind of like a little slope. There wasn't really a breast shape there. And then on the left-hand side where they had reduced, I kind of had this perfect like shape. So it was another one of those things where it was like a perfectionist thing. I was like, oh. And I think it's so hard when you have surgery and you kind of think like, oh, I'm going to have plastic surgery. It's going to look exactly how I want it to. But obviously that doesn't really happen. And trying to create symmetry, I think so all the research I did on boob jobs was kind of, oh, you've got this like a woman with two breasts and then they put implants in. Of course, it's going to look symmetrical because you're starting off with the same thing. And I just, in my head, thought I was going to get that. It was going to be a one-time thing. It was going to be fine. And for a lot of people, obviously, that happens, and that's really good. And like I'm aware, like me saying this, it really sounds like I'm saying don't have surgery, but I really do think I was just unlucky. But then last August, my surgeon called me and he said, I can do a surgery for you this month. And it was like 10 days before the surgery. He said, if you want it, you can have it. And I said to my boyfriend, I said to my family, like previously, I was like, I don't think I'm going to do another surgery. I don't think I want to put myself through it. I think I just need to learn how to be happy now and just love myself. And because I was at a point where I was so content with my arm and like I felt really good with my hand. I had no kind of insecurities in that area anymore. So I was like, well, maybe if I just learn how to kind of love that. And I felt fine in myself anyway. But then as soon as I got the phone call saying, do you want to have another surgery and we're going to try an implant, I was so excited. And I think that's the answer, really, isn't it? Like, I got the phone call and I was in my flat jumping up and down, like, I want to have a surgery. Like, this is so fun. And I called my boyfriend, like, oh my God, I'm going to have a boob job. And he was like, what? So yeah, I kind of thought like at that point, like and this surgery went absolutely fine. I'm 6 months post-op and I mean, it's still not perfect, but that is one of those things where I just need to stop picking it apart. It from far looks great, so it's fine. And I just kind of thought like, yeah, it's time, and I was really happy, and I do think it really did help, sort of thing. But yeah, that's I could have talked for longer about the surgery.
No, it's what? So there's so many things that's I want to dive into that is just incredible. Firstly, your attitude and your mindset and your confidence. I really want to talk more about that because to go through so many surgeries and to come out the other side, being able to make jokes about it or speaking about it, and you're more just like telling a narrative or a story. It's just incredible. I think that's unbelievable. But what's also really interesting is how the surgeries affect people differently. And so I think, anytime someone goes under the knife, there's always a risk of complication, especially if you're doing, kind of implants or things that they're putting into your body. I think there's always going to be a risk of something, right?
Yeah.
And, because I had surgery when I was 18. So obviously for me, it was also always an option. And the doctors really tried to, they said to my parents, try and get her to do it as late as possible so that I would have grown. But I was lucky because I was like an A cup, very small, which is a blessing and a curse. But so I was able to hide it a lot easier. And I did have a little bit of, I didn't have muscle, but I had a little bit of tissue at the bottom. And so I got an implant when I was 18. And then when I recovered from that, they offered to do the fat transplant as well. because at the top here, there's kind of like a little gap. And
Mm.
I just said, you know what? I can fit comfortably in a bra. I can wear clothes. And, the fact that I could do those things comfortably, I actually don't really care if there's one little thing that maybe you can notice if you're really looking at my chest,
Yeah.
and so I was happy, right? I didn't need that surgery, but it's interesting how for me that went fine. And for you, your body was kind of rejecting certain things and I'm really, really happy that
Mm.
you're in a place now that you had a successful surgery. And like you said, it looks good from far, you're comfortable with it, and you're really learning to love yourself for, your imperfections, so to speak. Because that's how I approached it. I was like, yes, it doesn't look perfect, like you're saying. If you started from the same base and then got the implants and everything looks nice and perky and cute and symmetrical.
Mm.
But I think also, for me, it gives me a lot of, how can I say this? I like that I'm different. I like that I don't look like everyone else and all of that. And so that's why I wanted to also chat to you about how you came to that kind of space where you got that surgery, you're happy with it, but you know, no matter how you looked, how was that process for you?
I think like I kind of came out of it the whole, like looking back now as a whole of the whole journey since I mean, it's almost been 10 years now since I had my first surgery. Looking at everything, if the first surgery went well, I would have stuck with that. And then when I hit 18, it would have been a silicone implant. And I think I don't have any regrets. I'm also extremely lucky being in the UK, having everything done on the NHS. I was very lucky, and my surgeon was very kind of gracious with me, and he worked with me. It wasn't sort of like, we don't care if it's not perfect. You're very lucky to get this surgery. I had amazing surgeons, and I do feel very fortunate in that aspect. So I think that really did help, because if I was anywhere else, it would have been a completely different story. Um, but I do just think, like, looking back at everything, it kind of gave me something to talk about. I felt when I was younger, even though I had my Poland syndrome, I didn't really feel like I had anything to talk about. I didn't feel comfortable talking about it. I wanted to hide it, the longest sleeves I could possibly wear. And I just kind of felt like I was going into this shell. And then when I got a bit older and I got a bit more confident just naturally, like with my friends and just with people that I kind of knew, it got to this point where I was like, do you know what? I have something that is so special and so rare. And it kind of gave me this purpose that, like, oh, I want to talk about this. I want to, because I know there are people out there who are a lot younger who do feel like they're alone. And I think we all go through that. So I just really wanted to have like the confidence to talk about it and to be someone that I didn't have when I was younger, if that makes any sense. I feel like that really did help me just kind of fall in love with myself and just really accept how I am and just go with it. And I mean, I still have my moments where I'm like, oh, it's like I call it my core. Like I'm like, oh, it's there. Like it doesn't do much. It's not very functional at times. But I think that's also something that I'm just like, do you know what? It's something so different. It's something so fun. And I get to do such amazing things now working with PIP. Like we're doing a fashion show in 2 weeks. So if I didn't have Cronin syndrome, there's no way I'd be doing that. So I think I'm looking at it in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So almost I honestly almost got emotional there because I think that's so incredible and it's so inspiring to have someone like you go through those challenges and, you know, almost view it as an opportunity to grow. And I think what you're saying there is you found purpose in that to really try and help other people. And I think I really became aware of that when I went to the event that we had last year with PIP. I went my whole life never meeting anyone with Poland syndrome. And now all of a sudden, we're walking around with babies that have it and, little kids that have it and girls that, are asking me questions or telling me facts that I didn't even know. And I think what you're saying there is amazing to be able to have that opportunity to be, an inspiration or a source of comfort for the younger generation so that they don't have to grow up never having that community, of people that can support them. What did you find were the responses from, your friends or your boyfriend, throughout this whole journey? I know that that's something a lot of girls speak about or they get worried about. Not even girls, just guys as well, especially when it comes to relationships. How was that kind of process for you?
I think like my friends and stuff, they all say to me now, like, we don't even see you as any different. You're just kind of Caron. And that is obviously really great. I have a very good set of friends. But I think when I was a lot younger, like primary school, secondary school, I felt I'm in a very small town. There's not much diversity of any kind of form. I mean, we're in Devon. It's not very big. Not there's not a lot going on. In school, there was only like 1% of the school had any sort of disability or difference or were of a different race. So I kind of felt like I was put into this group and I was just different and I wasn't able to get out of it. I felt very much just separated and just kind of like, you're not very cool. I mean, I wasn't the cutest kid. So I was just, I felt all very like, I felt very different and I felt it was really hard for me to try and make friends. To feel like there was any chance of me ever having a boyfriend felt so slim. I really just got to that point where I was like, no one, like, it felt very sad. And saying it, I feel kind of stupid. But I really did think, like, no one is ever going to want to love me because I look different. And, like, that's really sad because I know so many people go through that. And I felt really kind of like shy and I just didn't then put myself out there. If there was anyone I ever liked that no one ever knew, I wouldn't tell a friend. Like, the one time I did, I got forced into a relationship. Like year 8, my friends just went, go for it. And, it was a 1 week thing. But yeah, it was very much like, I remember I can't ride a bike. I can't swim sort of thing. So that was a bit difficult as well. And we did in year 7, so I was 11 years old. We won this bike trip to Exeter and you go kind of like rough stuff. It's like bike riding and trailing and stuff. And I went to my tutor, I went, I'm not going. And she was like, why? And just didn't even think about it. And then they got me this bike that I can't remember what it's called now, but it's got like a little hammock seat. The pedals are at the front. You basically lie down and then you've got brakes at the side.
Oh, I've seen those.
One of those. Yeah. And I remember being like, oh, this is so cool. Saw it. And then I saw the other kids' reactions and it was just sniggering. And I went, I don't want to do it. But I did it. I stuck with my friends and it was fine. But tell you what, that even was still quite difficult. Like, yeah, it was really fun, but you have to obviously hit the brakes at the exact same time. And I really struggled with that, so I started to tip a little bit. But I mean, I don't really ever look at the bad experiences now. I just think that was a really fun day. And we got to go like bike riding, and that's the one and only time I've ever ridden a bike. So I think that's quite cool.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But and I actually tried to convince my dad to buy one, but I think they're like £400, and he went, "No, when are you ever gonna ride that? Like, you'd have to be on the main road. That's not gonna fit on a pavement."
Yeah.
Like, no. And looking back, I don't think I would have had the like balls to actually ride that around my town. I think that would have been it would have definitely been something. But yeah, I think like it really just does depend. But I do like looking back now, like I had my first like the guy I'm with now is my first boyfriend, and I was very lucky. I met him, and he just he didn't know me. He's not from here. We met, and it was very natural. And at the time, I was like, it was 2 years ago. I was very confident in myself. I was working out, and I felt good. And I just, I had a bit of a glow up, and I was like, do you know what? I feel good. I'm just gonna let whatever happens happens, and I'll be fine. But I was still at the point of no guy actually wants to date me. Like, there was never anything that I was like, oh, this is just a bit,
Mm-hmm.
But I met my boyfriend and he went, there's nothing, like, he was like, it really doesn't faze him. He was very happy, and he kind of like, his family kind of introduced that they knew me, and they just went, oh yeah, she's just got this small hand. Like, it's just small. And he went, what do you mean? Like, had no idea. He went, what are you on about? I think a stump was mentioned. I don't have a stump, I do have fingers. But he was like, "What do you mean?" And then I met him and he was like, "It's just small." And I was like, "Oh," but it was still something where I first met him, I kind of hid it away. And he just went, "Don't do that. Like, it's fine. It really is a hand. Like, it's honestly fine." And then I think for me, with the whole boob situation, that was a bit harder.
Mhm.
I was very insecure about that, and just I thought like, "Oh, it's gonna look so different. He's gonna be like, what the hell is that?" sort of thing. But I really do think, like, and saying, I want to say this to like anyone that is going through that, no one actually cares. Like, if there's a group of girls, a group of guys in the corner laughing at you, that they're laughing at you because they're going through it, or they want to be like, "Oh, she's actually really confident," but like, why aren't we like that, sort of thing. And that's something I know now, but at the time it was very, being young, you don't think about it. You think, "Oh, they're all against me," sort of thing. But now I look back and I just want to say, like, it's all kind of subjective to how you view yourself. It doesn't matter how anyone else views you. Like, we're all different. Everyone's different. No one looks the same, and we shouldn't. Like, that would be so boring.
Mhm.
So I think, like, we all just, like, as long as we're happy, as long as we're confident, and you just kind of go in life and just go through it. And, like, no one is ever going to not love you because of how you look, if you look any different way. And if they do, you don't need to be with them. Like, that's how I view it now. And I think I'm very lucky being in the relationship I'm in, that he's helped me see that and just be like, it doesn't matter what you look like. You're just a nice person, and that works for me, sort of thing. So I
Yeah.
do think that's how I got through it.
I think, it sounds like you have an amazing relationship and he sounds like an amazing person. And I think it is something that a lot of people, a lot of girls in general, go through because even if they don't have Poland syndrome, having irregular breasts is normal, but it's not often spoken about. And I remember,
No.
yeah, I mean, I've been with my partner for 12 years this year. So, since I was in school. And I remember also kind of feeling like I was inadequate as a female. And
Yeah.
it was a weird feeling because I've never really felt, that type of insecurity before in my body. And he never ever gave me a reason to feel like that. But I think it's because we think about what we see online, we think about what is, quote unquote normal.
Mm.
And like you're saying, it's amazing how the right people won't care. People in general, not talking about your friends, kind of people elsewhere, they're so busy thinking about themselves. They don't care. And exactly what you were saying, if people have negative things to say, it's a reflection on them. And I know everyone says that, and like you're saying, it's difficult to remember or understand, especially when you're a teenager. I mean, being a teenager is hard enough as it is. But if
Yeah.
if there are, I really don't miss being a teenager. Those are the days I'm happier in the past. But if there are any, parents of teenagers or parents of, kids that are obviously going to be teenagers or teenagers themselves listening to this, you know, girl or boy, I think this is a very important discussion to have and just try and remember on those bad days that, people are in their own worlds. If they're doing something, it's a reflection on them. You have no reason to dislike yourself. And I think, Caron, what you're kind of saying is so important is to be confident in yourself, be kind to yourself, love yourself. And if you have that confidence, it almost kind of pours out. And, it's infectious. It really, really, it really is. And I think it's so important to remember that. There was something else that I was gonna say now that just slipped my mind. But yeah, I absolutely love that. I think that's such an important lesson. Oh, this is what I wanted to ask. In terms of being different as well, though, Caron, is there anything wrong with being different?
Not at all.
Like, what
Nothing
is
at
your
all.
opinion on, like you're saying, everyone is different. No one is perfect, physically, emotionally, whatever. So my question to you is there something wrong with being different?
I don't think so. I think it makes us who we are. I think being different is one of the best things you can be, really. You don't want to fit in, and I know, like, when we're younger, we want to fit in. That's all we want to do. We see something on social media and we go, yeah, that's what I want to be. But I think if you just kind of, like, go to your own kind of, like, path and you are just who you are, then it's all going to work out. And I think being different is the best thing you can be. And I'm saying that from like a, being different perspective. I think it's just like it works well. And like I do look at myself now and I think like I'm so happy I have Poland syndrome because it gives me something to talk about. And it's taught me so many lessons of just how to be, especially to other people. I think like I pride myself on hopefully being very nice when I was younger and now. And I think it just helps that because I felt so left out as a kid and I felt so kind of like separated from everyone else, I think just being kind to everyone, no matter who you are, is one of the most important things. But also just like, I think it's really taught me having Poland syndrome that like being different isn't a curse. Like it's not something that you have to hide away. You don't have to like just not show your Poland syndrome. Like it's who you are and you just have to embrace that. And I think that's something that I mean, PIP is doing really well to help, especially young people. Just being like, there's so many people out there. I mean, I still to this day, I've talked to people with Poland syndrome, but I've never physically met anyone. And I'm really excited to now have the charity that I can go to these events and I can now meet people. But I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm going to meet people that are different. Like, I'm just going to go meet like a community that I feel like I've been looking for my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. Like, it doesn't matter if you're different. I think it just, as long as we're kind and like we go through life, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's a superpower. Before we leave, I wanted to ask, what kind of parting advice do you have for someone who might feel different in a community, especially like you were saying, you're from a small town, so a small community. What kind of advice do you have for people to, be confident in themselves and also people who might be looking at surgery? What advice do you have for them before they embark on that journey?
I think for surgery, my main piece of advice is do it for yourself. Don't just be told, oh, you can have surgery, so have it. I think do it for yourself and really look into it, decide if that's something you want to do. And definitely don't take my story as a standard story. That was very unlucky. But I think, just make sure that you have a really good support system and that your friends are going to support you and your family are going to support you and you're doing it for all the right reasons. So I do think I just did it to be less different, to go off what we were saying. But I wanted to fit in. And I do think if I waited a little bit, I know in my heart of hearts, I always would have had the surgery. So I think that's something, if you know that you're going to have the surgery, if you get the option to have it and it excites you, then it's probably the right thing for you. But don't feel like you have to have the surgery. So many women don't. I mean, so many men don't as well. Like it works for both. So many people don't have the surgery and they're absolutely happy, they're fine, and they embrace it. And I think that's a really strong thing to do. And sometimes I wish I did it, but I know that like I'd be telling a lie because I'm glad I had the surgery, and now looking at it, I feel good that I've had it, and I mean it definitely gives me some stories to tell. But I think like just do it for you and make sure you have a good surgeon, a good support system, and that you know why you're doing it. And I think if you are the age I was, like being 15, it takes more consideration. You need to make sure that you're getting the right implant for your body, that you're doing like what works. And I do think like it all just works when you're a surgeon, where you are, like whatever you have access to as well. But it really does it all depends on how you feel about it. And if you feel like you want to have surgery, then do it, but don't feel pressured into doing it. And everyone's going to react differently. We're all going to have a different experience, but it's all for you and how you want to like kind of grow in yourself, I think.
And any advice for people on how they can really embrace themselves? Are we also learning that?
When I find out, I'll let you know. No, I think like just, I mean, I really do stand by fake it until you make it. I was not confident for a lot of my life, but I just had to pretend to be, to kind of like really just like act like I was happy. I mean, I was happy, but like act like I was happy in myself. And just, I think if you ooze confidence, if you show confidence, no one's going to know if it's real or not. You just have to kind of not present yourself in a certain way, always be like who you are. But I think if you want to be confident, be confident. Like, that's the only thing. That's how I did it. I just one day just went, you know what, I'm just going to embrace it. I'm going to dress how I want. I'm not going to let this hold me back anymore. And having Poland syndrome or not, I think embracing yourself is something only you can do. And you just have to really decide who you want to be and how you want to feel. Don't go with what everyone else is wearing or doing. Do what you want to do. And along the way, I think it will all fall into place.
Yeah.
But for a definition, I definitely don't have that.
No, I think that's great. And I think just to add on that from my side, I think, practicing things like positive affirmations throughout the day, that's something that really helps me. So as soon as you have a negative thought, just immediately replace it with a positive one. And it's incredible how your mind then eventually starts adapting to the things that you're telling it, because your mind doesn't know what's real or not. So you could lie to yourself all the time and your brain will just automatically assume it's real. So I love what you're saying. I think that's such great advice. And Caron, it's been such a pleasure talking to you and hearing more of your story. Are you going to be at the festival end of April in Birmingham?
I'm hoping to be, yeah. Okay. I really do hope so.
Amazing, because I'll be there as well. So it'll be amazing if we can meet there. But I'm excited to see the fashion show in 2 weeks. So if anyone is listening to this and the episode is out before then, then keep an eye out for that. If the episode comes out later than that, then oops. But Caron, it was so great chatting to you. And I'm just excited to see how you're going to grow in PIP and the Poland syndrome community and the work that you've been doing. I know we said this before the call, but it's been absolutely amazing. And I'm so happy that, people in the community have a role model like you to look up to. I think that's going to be, just so pivotal in people's experiences. So thank you so much for firstly being a part of that, and for, coming on and chatting to us. I had a really great time.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for having me.
Amazing.
This has been really nice.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow us and subscribe to our podcast, and follow us on our social media platforms, Instagram and Facebook. See you soon.